Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The government gave its first coordinated briefing on the Hong Kong residents detained after being lured to Southeast Asian countries looking for high-paying jobs. The Immigration Department said 8 Hong Kongers were still held captive in Myanmar. Christy Count with details.
After days of media reports about employment scams related to Southeast Asian countries, the government gave its first coordinated briefing on the matter. Under-Secretary for Security Michael Chek said the Immigration Department had received 20 requests for help from Hong Kongers who said they had been lured to Southeast Asian countries such as Myanmar, Thailand, Laos and Cambodia to work, but were detained afterwards. 10 people have already returned to Hong Kong, while 2 are reportedly safe and in Southeast Asia currently. But 8 people remain detained in Myanmar. The authorities said identifying their exact location is a challenge.
However, our immigration officers are trying their utmost and reach out to the Chinese embassy and the local CGs and to explore all the means and avenue and try to secure their safe return. And this will be our top priority.
The Security Bureau will coordinate efforts by the police and the Immigration Department in investigating into the cases. Officials also urged residents to beware of possible employment scams involving high pay without requiring relevant education qualification or work experience. Speaking to TVB News, a US-based anti-human trafficking group said it was in touch with 5 Hong Kongers who are believed to be trapped in KK compound in Myanmar, after the organization had received requests for help from family members of the missing parties. But it is not clear if they are among the 8 detainees identified by the Hong Kong government. The group said the victims were duped into joining scam syndicates. 2 of them allegedly got assaulted. Meanwhile, the Hong Kong office of the Commissioner of the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs said it is working with embassies and consulates abroad to follow up with the cases. Christy Khan, TVB News.
Macau police say they are dealing with 5 cases potentially related to Southeast Asian employment scams. The police said the syndicates were offering a monthly salary of $5,000 to attract residents to work at casinos in Southeast Asian countries, including Laos and Cambodia. But upon arrival, the victims would be detained or even assaulted. The detainees would be ordered to take part in illegal activities such as telephone scams. They are forced to pay a ransom if they want to leave. The city's daily COVID tally topped 6,000 today, the highest such figure since late March. Authorities say the case count is still on the rise, likely due to the increasing number of infections involving the more transmissible BA.5 strain. Jackie Lin with more.
Among the 6,054 new COVID cases reported today, some 5,800 are local infections, and 6 care homes detected new cases. One care home in Tsuen Wan earlier reported a positive case. The female patient and 22 other residents were sent to quarantine. With a low viral load and having tested negative for 2 days, the patient was discharged from hospital. Authorities say infected residents can only return to their respective care homes after showing a low viral load, or they will be sent to holding centers with temporary care services. The proportion of COVID infections suspected to carry the BA.5 variant now accounts for more than a quarter of the city's daily caseload.
We are already aware the situation is getting stringent. There's a chance that those non-essential services will have to stop. So because we still need to balance the need of those COVID patients as well as the non-COVID patients. So we are still observing the trend to see how to handle these situations.
Among the 243 imported cases, about 20% involved inbound travelers who tested COVID positive while holding the Amber Code, meaning they were out of hotel quarantine during days 4 to 7 after arrival in Hong Kong. 5 more COVID patients died. Only one of them completed the 3-dose vaccine course. 2 diseased patients have been discharged from hospital after recovering from COVID, only to be readmitted to hospital due to deteriorating health conditions. As both were plagued by chronic illnesses, health authorities believe it's likely their deaths were not directly linked to COVID. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Pro-democracy activists Benny Tai and Joshua Wong are among the 29 defendants who pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit subversion. They're among the 47 people charged over the unofficial legislative primary elections in 2020. 18 defendants denied their charges. They will face trial in the High Court.
The hearing for the defendants continued in West Kowloon Magistracy today. 29 defendants pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit subversion. That includes Benny Tai, Joshua Wong, Andrew Chew, and Au Nok Hin, Wu Chi Wai, Claudia Mo, Alvin Young, and Jeremy Tam. Also, Tiffany Yun, Lau Wing Hong, and Andy Cho. A 150-page-long document details their cases, which include the speeches and behaviors of each defendant in public. As a matter of fact, most of the 29 defendants are still serving jail sentences over other cases, and some were not granted bail. They will appear in groups at the High Court for trial and sentencing starting next month or November, with the trial duration for each defendant estimated to be 1 hour. 18 defendants pleaded not guilty. That includes Lam Chuk Ting, Helena Wong, Leung Kwok Hong, Winnie Yu, and Clarice Young, as well as Si Tak Loy, Calvin Ho, and Gwyneth Ho. Their trials will be in the High Court. The court heard that 47 pan-Democrats violated the national security law by hosting or participating in the so-called primary legislative elections in 2020. They were charged with conspiracy to commit subversion. Prime offenders charged with subversion could face at least 10 years in jail, while active participants are liable to at least 3 years behind bars. Meanwhile, National Security Law designated Judge Peter Law lifted a reporting ban on their committal proceedings upon the requests of 4 defendants.
One more staff member involved in the child abuse case at Children's Residential Home in Mongkok last year was sentenced to about 6 months in jail today. Cheng Wai-yin was charged with 2 counts of ill treatment or neglect by those in charge of a child or young person. It involves 2 one-year-old boys. One boy threw a blanket onto the floor and the defendant hit him in the head and slapped him. In another occasion, Cheng snatched a toy from a boy and shoved his head onto the bedside before slapping him twice. The 30-year-old admitted to her wrongdoings and was sentenced to 4 months and 10 weeks in jail. So far, authorities have filed charges against 34 staff members of the Children's Residential Home. 4 pleaded guilty to their charges and 2 of them face jail sentences. The city's corruption watchdog, the ICAC, arrested 30 people, including 4 senior managers employed by the airport authority, for alleged corruption over the airport's 3rd runway construction. The 4 who were on short-term contracts were in charge of reclamation and other works. The other 26 people were staff members of main contractors and subcontractors. The probe started after the ICAC received a complaint alleging staff members of the airport authority accepted advantages. Bribe payments totaling a few $1 million were deposited into the bank accounts of the arrested principal manager. Suspected bribes such as cash, luxury watches, fine wines and gold coins were also seized. An expansion project may be in the pipeline for the Lion Rock Tunnel, a move described by the government as long overdue. In an environmental assessment report compiled by the Highways Department, it proposed adding a 3rd lane and widening the tunnel in each direction. Also planned are full-scale renovation works. An experienced engineering project manager compared the 40 to 50-year-old tunnel to an old man who always needs to see a doctor, stressing the tunnel's wear and tear could impact its daily operations. The expansion work is expected to be completed in 2034. With that, the tunnel's capacity could be ratcheted up to 5,400 vehicles per hour, helping to ease traffic jams during peak hours. Welcome back. The U.S. government revealed it is set to hold talks with Taiwan on a wide-ranging trade treaty. The announcement comes with tensions rising between Beijing and Washington in the wake of U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan earlier this month. Daniel Rao tells us more.
The United States and Taiwan have agreed to start trade talks under a new initiative. Washington and Taipei had previously unveiled the so-called US-Taiwan Initiative on 21st Century Trade in June. That was just days after the US President Joe Biden's administration excluded the island from its Asia-focused economic plan. The Office of the US Trade Representative has now said the two sides had reached consensus on the negotiating mandate. The mandate said that Washington and Taiwan will discuss issues such as trade facilitation and good regulatory practices. Other matters to be covered will be agriculture, labor, the environment, digital technology, the status of state-owned enterprises, and non-market policies. The first round of talks are expected to take place early this autumn. Washington said negotiations would be conducted under the auspices of the US's unofficial embassy in the island, the American Institute in Taiwan. The announcement of trade talks comes as Taiwan's Air Force conducted anti-air drills with missiles and cannons on Thursday. Beijing reiterated its opposition to the new Taiwan-US trade initiative. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said today Beijing demands the US side take practical action to abide by the One China principle and stop any form of official US-Taiwanese exchanges, as well as refrain from negotiating agreements with Taiwan. He added the One China principle is a prerequisite for China's Taiwan region to participate in foreign economic cooperation. The mainland's Commerce Ministry also echoed these views. Meanwhile, a delegation of Canadian lawmakers is planning to visit Taiwan in October to seek economic opportunities in the Asia-Pacific region. Daniel Roll, TVB News.
Former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence says he would give due consideration if asked to testify before the House committee investigating the Capitol riot on January 6, 2021. Pence previously refused to say if he would agree to testify.
Well, if there was an invitation to participate, I would consider it. And any invitation to be directed to me, I would have to reflect on the unique role that I was serving in as Vice President. It would be unprecedented in history for a Vice President to be summoned to testify on Capitol Hill. But as I said, I don't want to prejudge. If there's ever any formal invitation rendered to us, we'd give it due consideration.
Pence has been trying to distance himself from his ex-boss, former President Donald Trump. On January 6, 2021, a mob of angry Trump supporters stormed the Capitol in an effort to stop Pence and Congress from officially certifying Joe Biden as president. America's top public health agency, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, has announced a major shakeup after admitting it fell short in responding to health crises. This story from NBC News.
Tonight, the CDC director is calling for drastic changes within the agency to better deal with public health emergencies. Dr. Rochelle Walensky now says, in our big moment, our performance did not reliably meet expectations.
How significant is that acknowledgement?
It's monumental. This speaks to not just the intent to acknowledge it, but the action that must follow and the accountability.
The agency had been slammed as slow to respond during COVID, also facing backlash after issuing guidance that seemed confusing. The sweeping reorganization includes a new executive council, a new equity office, and a more streamlined website. Walensky also plans to ask Congress to grant the CDC new powers, including mandating that local jurisdictions share their data. The course correction comes as federal health officials face criticism over the monkeypox vaccine rollout. The administration invested more than $1 billion developing it, but has just over 1 million shots on hand. There are also new concerns about polio, just the second instance of U.S. community spread in 43 years. Last week, health officials announced that polio had been detected in New York City wastewater.
Make sure that your children are protected because this is a very, very serious disease.
Today, a polio vaccine clinic opened in Rockland County, New York, an area where the vaccination rate is as low as 37%.
I may have gotten it as a child, but I wasn't sure about my records, so that's why I came to do it.
If you aren't sure about your immunization records, 32 states allow you to request them online, others by mail. If you have them, you should search for the letters IPV, which stand for inactivated polio vaccine.
If you're not sure you were fully vaccinated as a child and you can't find those records, then you should get a polio vaccine now. Even if you did get them as a child, getting another one now will be safe, it's very effective, and it can protect you from polio.
In the largest study of its kind, researchers say COVID-19 greatly raises the risks of dementia, psychosis and brain fog even 2 years after infection. The Oxford University study, involving data from almost 1.3 million US cases over 2 years, said COVID patients also face higher risks of anxiety and depression up to 2 months after recovery. The data was compared to an equal number of patients who suffered from other respiratory illnesses. Most at risk are people aged above 64, with 4.5% of recovered COVID patients developing dementia, compared to 3.3% who had other respiratory problems. The study says the biggest risk is brain fog, in which patients experience bouts of forgetfulness and mental fatigue. This affected 6.4% of COVID patients aged 18 to 64. The data suggests long COVID risks could affect as many as 100 million people worldwide. UN Secretary-General has arrived in Ukraine to meet President Volodymyr Zelensky and Turkish leader Tayyip Erdogan to discuss the war between Russia and Ukraine. Ukrainian forces, meanwhile, said they had repelled a Russian attack in the south, while Moscow has accused Kyiv of provocation at a nuclear power plant. Nazvi Karim has more.
United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres made a short visit to Lviv's National University ahead of his meeting today with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Along with Turkey Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan, the three leaders were to hold talks on how to end the 6-month war between Russia and Ukraine, as well as the resumption of grain exports. Another pressing issue is a standoff between Kyiv and Moscow on the nuclear power plant near Zaporizhzhia. This is a response drill by Ukrainian personnel in case of a nuclear disaster. Around 50 kilometers away from the Zaporizhzhia training center is the Russia-occupied nuclear power plant in Enerhodar. The plant is becoming a focal point of the war, with both sides accusing each other of shelling the area and risking a nuclear catastrophe. Russia says it has no heavy weapons at the plant, nor in nearby areas, and is accusing Ukraine of planning a provocative move on Friday. In the south, Ukrainian forces say they have stopped an attempted advance by Russian forces near the town of Biloheka, northeast of Kherson, killing 29 occupiers. Russia's defense ministry said its aerospace forces used high-precision weapons to hit the Ukraine command and observation post in the Kherson region, while carrying out concentrated strikes against Ukrainian positions in Donetsk. In Ukraine's second biggest city, Kharkiv, authorities say 7 people died and 16 were wounded after Russians bombarded a residential area. Zelensky described it as a devious and cynical strike on civilians with no justification. Ukraine officials also say 1 person was killed and 18 injured in the pre-dawn shelling of another residential area of Kharkiv. Meanwhile, 3 more grain-exporting ships left Black Sea ports, a monitoring group said, bringing the number of vessels to leave Ukraine under a UN-brokered deal to 24. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
London was hit by sudden heavy rainfall on Wednesday, following weeks of dry and hot weather in the capital and elsewhere in England and Wales. In response, the UK's National Weather Service, the Met Office, has now issued an amber weather warning for parts of southeast England. The body urged the public to be aware of potential flooding in these areas. The heavy rain comes after Westminster officially declared a drought across southern and central England last Friday, as Britain experiences one of its hottest and driest summers ever. Back locally, a local heirloom rice variety called Fa Yu Tsai has been reintroduced to the market after disappearing from local farms for decades. This brownish rice used to be widely cultivated in Campton, Yuen Long, in the New Territories in the 50s and 60s, but it had fallen out of favor as more rice was imported from overseas. The Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation Department obtained the seeds of Fa Yu Tsai in 2019, and the rice variety's genome sequence was restored through collaborative efforts by researchers at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, the government, and the Hong Kong Seed Technology and Education Center. Consumers can order Fa Yu Tsai freshly harvested in July through the vegetable marketing organization's Local Fresh mobile application. That's the news. Thanks for watching.